Welcome back. Well, coming up next week on Thursday, March 28th, the CCA is having an event. It's called Diabetes and Hypnotherapy. And one of the guests that is going to be there on that day is Dr. Maher Sadeghi.
Yes.
Sadeghi. Nice to have you here today.
Thank you.
And you're internal medicine, but of course, what you're going to be really talking about is the subject diabetes, right?
Yes. Diabetes is an epidemic, and it's still growing. More than 100 million of U.S. adults are now living with diabetes or pre-diabetes. Diabetes was the 7th leading cause of death in 2015. But it's also important to realize that even though it's a very serious disease with serious complications, it's preventable. And we can even prevent it, we can delay the onset. In some cases, we can reverse it, but we can definitely manage it with lifestyle changes, diet, more physical activity, and appropriate use of medications.
Right. What are some of the signs of diabetes? And I'm not necessarily talking about you go to the doctor and they do a blood test and that sort of thing. Can an individual kind of notice signs, or is it a little too hard?
In some cases, you can. What's difficult with type 2 diabetes, which most adults have, is that for the longest time it's silent. The typical symptoms of diabetes, like thirst, weight loss.
Weight loss? Really?
Yes.
I never would have guessed that.
Those we usually see in type 1 diabetes. With type 2 diabetes, it rarely gives any symptoms unless it leads to complications.
And this is the type 2 is the kind you're talking about?
Yes.
So type 1 is more of the one that, for lack of a better term, a lot of people it might be hereditary, or they're born with or something. Is that?
Well, traditionally type 1 was also called insulin-dependent diabetes. It usually affects children and younger adults. We don't know the exact mechanisms for it, but we think it's a combination of genetics and environmental. And environmental, people have argued virus or chemicals and such. But really that's because the pancreas can't produce enough insulin. So those patients become very symptomatic and they need to start insulin from the beginning when they get diagnosed.
Right.
But with type 2 diabetes, the initial phase of it is not so much that we don't have enough insulin, it's that the body is insulin resistant, meaning the cells can't use the existing insulin to metabolize the sugar. And that we often see in our older adults, but unfortunately we see it more and more in younger adults and even children because of obesity.
And that is something that let me ask you, let me put this another way. When someone goes in and gets a standard blood test every year, or whatever, depending on your age, how often you do that, is that something they pick up on then?
Absolutely.
And that's how they're going to kind of figure out you're diabetic or pre-diabetic or you're fine or whatever it might be.
Exactly. So we usually do those screenings once a year, but for individuals who are at risk, we do that more often, or somebody with symptoms, we would do that more often.
And people who are at risk would be folks who are what?
Overweight, obese, people with family history of diabetes, or certain other medical conditions such as cardiovascular disease or kidney disease and such.
All right, so that's something to look for. Now, on coming up on Thursday, you're going to be talking about this, and your part will be more about what we just talked about, right? What to look for, prevention.
Exactly. I'll be talking about mechanisms behind diabetes and treatment options and symptoms and all that. All
right, and again, that is next week, Thursday, the 28th. So if you'd like to attend, just show up 11:30 at Clubhouse 5, and it's great to have you on today and talk about this.
Great being here.
Appreciate it, and have a good event next week.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, doctor. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.